Another edition of The Flex. The absolute best fantasy football podcast in existence.
So I'll say this, not to say that I disagree, but
I disagree.
Oh my God.
Presented by Broadway Sports.
all right, Flexers ready?
Welcome into The Flex, the most accurate fantasy show hosted by me and two guys who want you to know to draft Jordan Wilkins as RB1 in 2022. My name is Zach Lyons. You can follow me on Twitter at FWordsPod. I'm joined, as always, by the coach translator himself, Robert Greenlaw. Follow him on Twitter at Rob on Broadway. And, of course, we're both joined by a guy whose family crest says, all those that wander are not lost. Justin Graver. Follow him on Twitter at Titans Film Room. We are all brought to you by the world's first secret sports shell company that covers the Tennessee Titans, BroadwaySportsMedia.com. Go subscribe today because we have something major dropping soon. It's going to be awesome. We are beta testing it. It's going to be great. Tonight, we're going to talk about the backups that rev us up and end-of-season strategies with playoffs upon us. Boys, it's been a while since I've been here. You guys have been holding down the fort. So good to be back. How are you doing? We'll start with you, Greenlaw. How's your night going?
It's going okay. Got a sick kid, so you do what you can there, but doing well otherwise. I can't say the same thing for my fantasy team, so most of them punting this season so far.
Ouch.
How about you, Graver? How are you doing? You're moving in a week.
I'm doing great. We had the company holiday party at SoFi Stadium last night. It was tons of fun. I'm very tired because I was out very late and had to produce a fantasy show this morning. So, things are fun. Things are fine, but I'm doing good and I'm ready for this show tonight.
Well, I saw you throw a football, JG. Yeah. That was pretty incredible. That was a feat of athleticism.
Where did you see that at? Because I would like to watch that.
On his Instagram. Make sure to check out his Instagram.
Yeah, I need to pull it, then critique it, and maybe get a little whiteboard out and see how it goes.
It's not the best coverage overall.
That is a good question by Daniel, because I got that same question for you guys later on in the show, because we always end the night with our world-renowned sit-start questions and answer. So please head over to YouTube or Facebook to submit your questions and watch us there. So got some good questions coming in from Daniel. Keep having them come in. We'll go towards them at the end. We're going to talk about, he's got a lot. He must be in a win and in situation in his league for the playoffs. And we're going to give you all kinds of strategies today, and maybe we'll hit on a few of these questions as it goes. But let's talk about the backups that rev us up. So it's that time of the year. I personally got affected by a major injury, and I'll talk about that later. And so a lot of injuries happen this weekend. A lot of backups are having to show up and step in. There's some key matchups across the league where you're going to want to take advantage and maybe dip into the waiver wire and free agent pool. So we got some people that may still be out there for you. So, and they could be a playoff entry winner, I guess you would say, playoff spot winner. So, Greenlaw, let's start with you. Give us a few of your guys that are backups that rev you up.
Yeah, I just have a couple. One of them's Tony Pollard, who's been playing really, really well while Zeke's been banged up a little bit. Sounds like Pollard was on the injury report today and he didn't practice, but they said it's nothing to worry about and he should play. And with Zeke having that knee injury continue to pop up, I can see Pollard continuing his streak of being a top 20 back. This isn't a guy who's with Zeke there, he's not going to be a RB1, but he's a very safe RB2 while Zeke's still playing. If Zeke were to go out, he's very high-end RB1, but while they're both playing in this timeshare, he's a solid RB2 for the time being. And then the other guy is, benefit of injury, Madison with the Vikings. Every week Dalvin Cook's been out that he's played, all but one. He's been an RB1. Last week he was RB8 overall. Until Cook comes back, you got to start Madison. I think it's that simple. No overthinking it there. So hopefully, if you had Cook, you had Madison on your bench somewhere.
Yeah, Madison's unbelievable, right? I mean, I don't see why they don't use him more to help prevent some injuries for Dalvin Cook, who obviously they lean on a lot. But as soon as he goes out, Alexander Madison's that like one of the few backups in the league, backup running backs that you have to draft, even if you don't have Dalvin Cook, in my opinion, from here on in, because he's eventually gonna get 5 or 6 starts and be something for you. Graver, you're shaking or nodding your head in agreement. That's a rare occasion that we agree. You got anything to add?
Yeah, I did. I just think all that is so true. Dalvin Cook gets hurt every single year, it feels like, and when he goes down, they give Madison the full workload, and it's like, how many situations like that are left in the NFL where when the starter gets hurt, the backup isn't going to be like 3 guys that are splitting carries. So I agree, super valuable.
He's one of those guys which is why people think running backs don't matter, that kind of thing, because you have an instance like Madison where literally the production's the exact same. There's almost no drop off between the two of them.
AJ Dillon's another one, because you got to think that Aaron Jones is going to be out. Whoever is going to be the backup in Carolina, obviously from here on in, is draftable, whether you need a handcuff or not. And then you might as well, if you're going to draft one San Francisco running back, you might as well draft the whole lot of them at this point, because they're all getting injured. And going back to your other one, Tony Pollard. I was a big Tony Pollard guy his rookie year. I told people they need to draft him and all this stuff, and people did, and it didn't work out. But he is proven to be the more efficient running back between him and Zeke, which goes against what Graver had said at the beginning of the season, was Zeke was going to be back to his old ways. And whether it's injuries, whether it's he's just not, his heart's not in it for whatever reason, I don't know what's really going on there. But Tony Pollard is another guy that next year you're going to have to draft.
No doubt.
I'm going to go with a few guys that people got injured this weekend. They're going to be stepping in. And one guy who's already stepped in the absence of his wide receiver one, is Russell Gage, who has outpaced the last 3 games in targets over Kyle Pitts. And on top of that, the big thing with him is that he logged 130 yards in week 13. And he has now recorded 18 plus PPR points in back-to-back games, dropping 24 on the Buccaneers in a loss. He's healthy, and when he's healthy, he's effective, and it's him and Kyle Pitts. So really right now, that's it for the passing attack of Atlanta, which is, besides Cordarrelle Patterson, which is not that great of a passing attack. They haven't logged 300 yards passing in the last month. They haven't logged 300 yards passing. Now, let me preface this by saying that they're about to go up against Carolina, which is a great pass defense. And the Panthers on that other end haven't cleared 200 passing yards in a game since week 4. So, like, it's going to be a crazy game that I'm probably staying away from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably
you
why
need
to
Joe
run
Brady
the ball
got fired.
more. Yeah, you got to run the ball more in that situation.
Yeah. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are both out right now with COVID situations and stuff. They have varying degrees of severity. They're talking like Mike Williams will come back. I think they expect Keenan Allen back, but a guy that I would be buying low on right now, who's probably sitting out there, is Jalen Guyton. Because if one of those guys goes out, when they were both healthy, he was getting targets like crazy last week, and he is a big dude. I mean, like, he's a big
great
target.
downfield. I'm impressed every time he goes over to catch the ball. Like, where did this guy even come from, and why can the Titans never find anyone like this?
Right. I was watching the game, and every time he's on red zone, here's Jalen Guyton making this great play, and I'm like, who is that?
Yeah, he's been doing it for a couple of years.
Yeah, so that is a guy that I would be stashing away just in case, especially if you're a Mike Williams or Keenan Allen owner, just in case that guy goes down, because he seems to be the kind of a mismatch guy when all 3 of those guys out there. They have some really big receivers out there in LA. And then you have Elijah Mitchell is in concussion protocol. He also had an injury severe enough to warrant an MRI. I don't think he's like Dak Prescott where he's addicted to MRIs, but it's definitely was an injury that it is. And it's an irritation of the knee. Here's where that lands me. Elijah Mitchell is probably not going to play this Sunday. They don't need Elijah Mitchell as a running back to succeed at anything. Now, he's great, don't get me wrong. But they're going to play Jeff Wilson, who he's been easing back into the lineup. He's a guy that I would pick up right now because guaranteed that Elijah Mitchell will not be ready on Sunday. And that means that Jeff Wilson will be the guy. That's what I've seen from 49ers fans and everything. They said not even worry about JaMychal Hasty. So you're going to want every bit of that San Francisco backfield, of course. And then, of course, Adam Thielen broke my heart this week. Put me in a real bind, made me had to watch that dreadful Buffalo Bills game and New England game because I had the Patriots defense in. With him posting a goose egg, that put me behind, and I needed this win. Got it? So it was good. Nice. KJ Osborne is the one that you want. And KJ Osborne has been getting targets kind of like a Jalen Guyton, but KJ Osborne has been involved even with Thielen on the field all throughout the year. He's going to get a lot of targets because at this point, nobody has to worry about KJ Osborne technically, like they would have to keep an eye on Adam Thielen, and they're going to take away Justin Jefferson at this point. Now, whether that prevents Justin Jefferson from doing anything, I doubt it. I don't know if anybody can stop him right now, but KJ Osborne is a solid roster. Pick him up right now because you don't know. Adam Thielen may miss the next 2 to 3 games.
I agree. I also think you got to pick up Tyler Conklin in that situation too. He actually out-targeted Osborne on Sunday after the injury. So I think you got to pick him up, and tight end is so thin. He's almost an instant tight end 1 when you pick him up, and he's probably available. So that's definitely a guy I'd be going for in addition to Osborne or someone as a wide receiver 3.
Yep, totally agree on all points.
Graver, who do you have?
I have a few guys here. Some of them are more like just in case. Like you never know what's going to happen with these starters. And you talked about earlier. You mentioned AJ Dillon. He's on my list. If there's any chance he's still available, he's someone that has to be stashed on rosters right now. But also, I think Hunter Renfrow is a wide receiver that needs to be rostered and probably flexed almost on a weekly basis right now. He's been a top 15 wide receiver more times this season than Stephon Diggs, which is crazy. And it just speaks to how much Diggs has been inconsistent up and down, but also Hunter Renfrow is a consistent target there. As long as Darren Waller is dealing with an injury, even if he's able to play, he's going to have to, I think, be limited with this injury he suffered. So Hunter Renfrow is the man in Vegas. And this one doesn't really count either because I don't know if you consider him a backup, but T. Higgins has supplanted Jamar Chase. So thus right now with the Bengals as their go-to, Joe Burrow's most trusted go-to wide receiver, which I think is interesting because just Chase was so effective earlier in the year. But over the last 2 weeks, T. Higgins is the number 1 wide receiver in all of fantasy. So if you have him still and you're like hesitant about starting him for any reason, like you get him in your lineups. He's a bona fide wide receiver 1 these days. He was the wide receiver 1 of the last 2 weeks. And some other guys I think that are worth stashing just to throw on your roster and hope for and see what happens is like Amir Abdullah in Carolina, because Chuba Hubbard is going to take on the brunt of the workload now, and he's not the biggest guy either. And if he were to go down at some point, Abdullah is a backup that could rev you up like perfect timing into the championship. But obviously not rooting for anyone to get injured or anything like that, but just like they happen. So stash those guys and see what can happen. Just look at those situations around the league.
Yeah, you definitely with the playoffs upon you, you got to start looking at guys you could just dump off your roster and try to find guys that you would have to start in a pinch that you feel comfortable in. Because at this point, there's no sense in keeping like Alex Collins. I wouldn't even really roster Adrian Peterson. I wouldn't touch anybody in that backfield at Seattle. So if you have any of those guys, I'd be comfortable enough to drop all of them because they're not going to get you double-digit points. They may give you 5.
Bills running backs can go. I think there's a lot of guys we can start cutting bait with here. Like I think Devontae Smith has been a fun guy, but you can never, at this point, you can't be comfortable starting him any given week. I think it's time to say goodbye.
Yep. Emmanuel Sanders. There's a lot of guys. Mike Davis, if you haven't already. he's got to go. He played with Patterson out, and he still only had, I think, like 13 points, and that's because he had a touchdown. I mean, not sustainable. So yeah, there's a lot of guys you can trim your
Texans
roster
running
down
backs. I mean, like
Yes.
there's so many that it would almost be better to roster Chuba Hubbard's backup than
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Let's get into
get all
that.
these lottery tickets,
Yeah.
tickets instead of guys that you know are going to be middling fantasy guys.
Let's get into that playoff strategy. I mean, as we approach week 14 for a lot of leagues, this is the last week of the regular season. It's the last week of the regular season for all of my leagues of record, all 5 of them. And even if you're not going to make the playoffs, like it's time to plan ahead for weeks 15, 16, 17, because you don't want to be playing in the whatever toilet bowl, whatever you call your toilet bowl in your fantasy league for the last place. Like you got to be prepared for that, whether you're in the playoffs or not. So start looking ahead, drop all these guys that you're never going to start, that you consider starting every week and like go back and forth on and then never start. Cut them. Add defenses, add handcuffs, handcuff your best starters or starters of the other players, other fantasy managers in your team, in your league, because if their guys get hurt and they go to the waiver wire to claim them and you already have them, that's going to be a huge advantage in the playoffs, not only because they can't get them, but because you have a usable asset now too. So it's time to plan fully for the playoffs 1 week in advance. This is the last week of buys. There's no reason to keep any of these scrubs.
And it's a very good time to remind that if you're in a league without an IR spot and you are basically not going to make the playoffs, I would be dropping, and you're in a keeper league, I'd be dropping players and going out and getting seeing if J.K. Dobbins is out there, or, players that got injured early out in the year, maybe even Travis Etienne and stuff like that, just to go ahead and stock up on some guys that you can keep for next year because they're not going to be around. Let me say this. With the way the Browns running backs went, I would almost pick up Dearness Johnson just in case you need him for this playoff run, because you never know when those guys are going to go down, because they don't have a very good history of staying healthy either. If just one of those guys goes down, it actually improves Dearness Johnson. So got to be thinking about that kind of stuff. Greenlaw, what's another strategy for the playoffs?
Yeah, I think we talked about it, but just getting these handcuffs. Also, I also want to say I've been dropping people and adding guys that are injured for the rest of the season in my keeper league because of that, because I can keep them for like a 7th rounder. So I've added Cam Akers, who might come back at some point this year, is what the Rams keep on saying. So adding him for next year he's going to be available in every single one of your leagues. People have forgotten about Cam Akers. So a guy you could pick up for the long term is definitely him. But yeah, I think you got to trim your roster now, whether it is for the long term or for the playoffs. Get rid of those guys you are in between starting, and grab a bunch of these handcuffs. I don't know if we want to run down those handcuffs just yet, but there's a list of guys that you can pick up that are, break in case of emergency guys.
I mean, like one of them would be Carlos Hyde. I mean, he's probably available in a bunch of leagues, and James Robinson is battling through injury. I mean, you said to drop Mike Davis, but if you have Cordarrelle Patterson with his usage, I mean, you may want to keep Mike Davis. I wouldn't keep any of the Buffalo guys. Amir Abdullah, I guess, because he's behind the Chuba Hubbard, but they also want to run the ball. So Chuba Hubbard goes down. They're obviously going to be using him a lot. Jarrett Patterson, if J.D. McKissick still isn't healthy.
Yep, I think you got Pirine. If Mixon goes down, Pirine wasn't on the injury report today, so he should be good, even though he came out of the game last week. Larry Roundtree and Justin Jackson with the Chargers. Eckler was banged up, limited with an ankle injury today. Roundtree is going to be the guy who's the running back, and Jackson's the pass catcher. So that might sway who you pick up if you're in a PPR league or not. Devontae Booker, he should be rostered already because Saquon can't stay healthy, and Booker gets like 90% of the carries when he's out. So Saquon limited today. That needs to be a guy you have on your roster. Peyton Barbour with the Raiders. Kenyon Drake's out for the rest of the year. Peyton Barber's the next man up after Josh Jacobs. Chuba Hubbard, we talked about him, and then Amir Abdullah after him. We talked about Jeff Wilson, and then one who I think is probably not rostered in a lot of places, but would be a league winner for sure if his starter went down is Marlon Mack. If
I was going to say that.
If Taylor goes down, and his workload's been insane, so I almost wonder if at some point he is going to break down. He's a league winner, and Marlon Mack is the league winner. So just, Taylor might not get injured, very well might not happen, but you got to have him on your roster just in case. So add Marlon Mack for sure.
Anybody we missed, Graver, off the top of your head?
No, I mean, every time, I was like, I had like, oh, I'm going to say that guy. Boom. Greenlaw got him. Greenlaw nailed all of them. P. Ryan, I love. I think if you had to like put him in a priority order, P. Ryan's in the top of my list for me if he's healthy. Joe Mixon's already banged up. It's not even the fantasy playoffs yet, and he's already banged up. Like, there's a chance P. Ryan has a role right now. So he catches passes from Joe Burrow. He made some great grabs earlier in the season. He runs tough. What are the Bengals doing? They got 2 Sooners in their backfield. Mixon and P. Ryan. It's gross.
Honestly, I think I told someone earlier, but I think Zach Taylor should be fired. He is a awful coach. They don't change anything for anything. They run 5-man protections no matter what. It basically, their offense is, we're going to have our amazing skill players just out talent your defense. That's the offense. It's awful.
Yeah, true.
Well, speaking of other strategies, let's talk about targeting teams that have easy schedules come up, specifically some quarterbacks, maybe some wide receivers are still out there. Let's start with one of the easiest ones, and probably the one with a lot of maybe available players out in your waivers, whether it's the quarterback or a few of the wide receivers, the Denver Broncos. And obviously Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon's going to be taken, and more than likely Jerry Jeudy and Noah Fant. But I would definitely be targeting Tim Patrick if he's in your league, and or you need to be targeting Teddy Bridgewater, because they're about to go up against the Lions, the Bengals, the Raiders, and then the Chargers. And if you're still in week 17, that's still big. But the Lions this weekend, I'm starting Tim Patrick because Tim Patrick is still getting 67 snaps last week. And that's 11 more than Jerry Jeudy and just 1 behind Cortland Sutton. Now, he didn't do a lot with it, but you're talking about a guy who earlier in the year was getting a lot of receptions and catching a lot of balls and putting up double-digit points like crazy. He'll get back to that. And I think that this is a good stretch for this offense to get right. It's been a very boring offense, and especially against the Lions defense, which is one of the worst. And it's been a broken defense all year, and the Raiders and Chargers both rank in the bottom 10 in rushing success rate. So you got that for Javonte Williams. Cincinnati might be the only troubling matchup, but I don't think it's going to be that bad. The Cortland Sutton is the issue because he's not seeing even like 4 looks per game right now. So it's really going to Tim Patrick and or Jerry Jeudy or Noah Fant. I think a lot of this stuff will get balanced out. And I think that when you play against bad defenses like the Lions, the Bengals, the Raiders, and the Chargers that are bad for fantasy purposes, or good for fantasy purposes, but bad defenses in general, you'll see some rebound from this. Any thoughts before I move on to the next one?
All good thoughts.
The other one is going to be, if you got David Montgomery, you're going to be very happy. That's about it for the Chicago Bears. But the other one is going to be the Washington football team. I think Curtis Samuel's getting more and more usage every week. Logan Thomas's situation is not that dire, but not a guy you really want roster right now, probably. But Heineke for MVP. I mean, this guy is awesome, and he's so fun to watch. I watched a lot of Washington football team these last few weeks, and they're going up against the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Cowboys, and the Eagles. And, I mean, that's crazy. But the Eagles ranked 21st in rushing success rate, 26th against the pass. And now, listen, Dallas is a top-tier pass defense thanks to turnovers, but they're big plays.
They give up the plays. They give up the big plays.
They're 21st and 28th in explosive plays. So I'm looking at it as a team that had Antonio Gibson, and you know how we all feel about Antonio Gibson. Rev him up. This is going to be the guy for the next 4 weeks, and you could not, if you stuck with Antonio Gibson, you could not be a happier person.
That's the truth.
Only one player has more carries than Antonio Gibson over the last 4 weeks, and that's Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
Who's going to break down, and Marlon Mack's going to win your fantasy league.
And Terry McLaurin's got some slow weeks, but again, explosive plays are on the horizon going up against the Eagles and the Cowboys. I think that he's going to have some big bounce back games. I still would maybe roster Curtis Samuel if you're really, really nervous, but not anybody I'd be too upset that if you didn't. And then you look at the Tennessee Titans, they have a real easy schedule. And so do the Detroit Lions, which are both teams with offenses in their current form that really don't excite you. But you're looking at, for the Lions, you're looking at, from a rushing perspective, they play the Broncos, the Cardinals, the Falcons, and the Seahawks, which from that perspective is a really good matchup for DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, especially the Cardinals, who you can't really pass on, but their run defense is atrocious. And then while you look at the Titans, you really don't know which running back you're going to be able to start. I would say Hillard. Don't know if you guys agree, and we'll talk about that. But you got the Jaguars, Steelers, 49ers, and Dolphins, and those are all going to be really plus matchups for the Titans offense, no matter who is really out there. What are you guys' thoughts on the Titans and the Lions?
The Lions, I agree, and I think go ahead, JG.
Sorry, I'm just interested in how the Titans will deploy these backs with Jeremy McNichols back, because it felt like Hilliard came in as a replacement for McNichols, and McNichols practiced on Wednesday, appears to be ready to come back from his concussion. And in my opinion, I think Hilliard looked like a better runner, and did get some play before some other backs there in the last couple of weeks, but I think it was like Hilliard and then Adrian Peterson and then Foreman against the Texans, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of who got touches first.
Yeah, but then last week Foreman out-touched Hilliard. So I don't know if that's going to stay consistent. I would worry that the pass-catching opportunities are going to diminish when McNichols comes back. That's one of those things I kind of want to wait out a week. I don't want to be in a position where I have to start any of those three this week. I kind of want to see what it looks like this week and then maybe next week. But I do think one of those guys may be valuable down the stretch. And then the Lions, you said, I think it hinges on DeAndre Swift's health. But obviously, Williams has been super valuable without Swift in the lineup.
I like the Lions in terms just from like this team, although they're 1-10, they are not going to quit. So you don't have to like worry about that from a fantasy standpoint. I think like Amon-Ra St. Brown potentially could be in play as a flex option at receiver. Although I don't know at this point, do you want to start a guy like that? TJ Hawkinson though, like I started Pat Freiermuth over TJ Hawkinson last week, and I regret it. And I think I'm going to go back now. Hawkinson looks like he's ready to be my every week starter.
He looked really good this last week.
He looks amazing.
He really did.
The other guy who has a great schedule down the stretch is Elijah Moore, who we all love, but he's been amazing the past month, and he's got one of the easiest schedules going forward. His schedule in the fantasy playoffs is Miami, who gives up a lot of points to wide receivers, the Jags, and then the Bucks. So three of the best wide receiver offense or defenses you could go against. So, I mean,
I'm looking at it like this. You may have these wide receivers available on your waiver wire, and you may want to go get them. I'm going to name them. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Reynolds, and sad enough to say, Julio Jones is probably on your waiver. And right now with their schedules, I would be going to look at them. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown since week 11 leads the team with 90 routes run and has 20 targets. I mean, he's playing in 2 wide sets, right? Josh Reynolds is in the moonwalked right into the top outside receiver spot, and he's second on the team since week 11 with 81 routes run. This is crazy, and he's sporting the highest average depth of target, 16.6 by far. Josh Reynolds. There is no reason that if those guys are still available, with the playoffs looming and injuries bound to happen, those are 2 guys I would be targeting to roster just in case. I'm not saying that you start them. I'm just saying just in case. At least after the Denver game, you're going to want these guys on your roster.
Yeah, and with Julio, the Titans had 100-yard games from Marcus Johnson and Nick Westbrook-Akine without Julio in the lineup. They can support a 100-yard receiver in this offense, even when they're not like that great of a receiver. So Julio's got added explosiveness. We've seen him this year be a legit deep threat. That's definitely someone that you want to have on your rosters without A.J. Brown the next couple of weeks.
Graver, any more strategies you want to talk about?
So I think it's time to start loading up on defenses right now in advance of the playoffs, planning for every single week. And if you've been relying on one good defense all year, that's great. Keep it going. Stash some other options as well. If you've been streaming defenses all year, you already know what this is like. You got to look ahead at the matchup. So I'm going to name a few that are low rostered that could be useful. The first one I have is the Chiefs, rostered in about 23% of leagues. The Chiefs defense, this is a crazy stat, is the highest scoring Chiefs fantasy player over the Chiefs' last 2 games, higher than Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and a quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. And it's not like they've been scoring a ton of points, but in standard leagues, last 2 games, they have 13 points against Denver, 16 points against Dallas. Dallas is a good offense. They scored 16 fantasy points, held Dallas offense to 9 points. The Chiefs offense is struggling right now, but their defense over the last 4 games, they haven't allowed more than 14 points. And in 3 games, they haven't allowed more than 10 points. And looking ahead at their schedule, it's not a great schedule, but they get Vegas next week or this week. Vegas can put up points, but in a divisional matchup, they held Vegas to 14 a few weeks ago on the road. I think they can do well in that game. The Chargers week 15 is a tough one. I don't know if you want to start on week 15, but then week 16, they get Pittsburgh. Ben Roethlisberger struggling. That offense looks terrible. Week 17, Cincinnati. Cincinnati has been good and bad, up and down, but we've seen Kansas City's defense play well against good offenses. So I'm not like that worried about them. Most people don't want to roster the Chiefs defense because early in the year they were really, really bad, like historically bad, but they're getting healthier. They're figuring it out. And I think they're worth rostering for the fantasy playoffs. Any thoughts before I move on?
No, I mean, I think you're right. I talked about it a little bit on the podcast this week of Football and Other F Words and on Easton's podcast, Titans 10. Now the Chiefs are going up against defenses or offenses that you're not too scared of, right? I mean, like, so you don't really know what they really are, but we've seen it time and again. This is the time of year where defenses get pumped up and go on hot streaks, and there's nobody hotter than the Kansas City Chiefs right now on defense, right? In my opinion.
Yeah, and if by some miracle the Bengals defense is available in your league, they have the easiest schedule the rest of the way. So they generate a lot of sacks, a lot of pressures. That's the defense I would want to have on my roster come playoff time.
Nice. My next one is a defense that's rostered in a few more leagues, closer to 50% of leagues, but still I think a great option. I've been riding this defense actually for the last couple of weeks, and they've been really good. And it's the Dolphins defense, which is somewhat surprising, but they were a 1-7 team or something like that, and now they're like in position to compete for the 7th seed in the playoffs. Over the last 2 weeks, 25 points, 10 points. 4 weeks ago, 17 points against Houston. 5 weeks ago, 18 points. They only scored 4 points against the Jets, which is kind of weird, but they play the Jets again in week 15. They play the Saints with whatever the heck's going on at quarterback for the Saints in week 16 and all their banged up offensive line injuries. The Dolphins and Titans play week 17. If the Titans are still dealing with a lot of injuries and the offense is still turning the ball over a lot, that could be a good fantasy matchup. I don't expect it will be by then, but the Dolphins can, I think, get you to the fantasy championship if they are still available in your league. Again, rostered in a little over 50% of leagues, so you may not be able to grab them, but I grabbed them a couple of weeks ago, and they've been amazing ever since.
So, JG, how many of these defenses are you going to roster? Are you talking like 2 or 3 max? Like
I would be comfortable with. I mean, it depends on your lineup for sure, but if you don't have like handcuffable players or like the handcuffs aren't available, like I wouldn't think it was crazy to stash a different defense for each of week 15, 16, and 17 right now. And if we get to week 17 and that matchups kind of change, players are injured or not injured or whatever, and things don't look the same, and you have to make it pivot to an alternative, it's not crazy to me to roster a fourth defense over the last 4 weeks to like just make sure you have a really good matchup there, because this is where it really matters. Like every year we see these crazy games happen in the fantasy championships where like Aaron Rodgers scores 2 points, and you're like, if Aaron Rodgers only scores 2 points in your fantasy championship, you're probably not going to do very well unless you planned ahead really well, got a little bit lucky, but played it smart, and your defense scores 20 that week. Like now you can start to make it up a little bit. And the other thing that you do when you take 4 defenses that have good matchups and stash them on your roster, it's like all your league mates are scrambling because there's no good defenses left because you took them all. So I don't think that's that crazy to make your entire bench. If you have 8 bench spots, 4 handcuffs and 4 defenses.
I'm at least rostering 2. I'm keeping the New England Patriots who are on bye.
Because for sure, the Patriots are, if you have a great defense like the Patriots, you have to keep them.
Yeah, so I'm keeping them while they're on bye on the roster because they still got Indianapolis, Buffalo, Jacksonville, and Miami. And I think those last 2 games are going to be huge. And so I picked up Denver's defense, and I'm surprised that Green Bay was actually the defense that was picked right before them in the waiver wire. So I was very lucky because I didn't have a defense, obviously. And Denver right now is going to have Detroit, Cincinnati with Bumfinger, Joe Burrow, and then they're going to then they have the Raiders. So like to me, that's looking pretty good to have.
And they've looked terrific the last few weeks too. I mean, they look unbelievable.
I drafted the Broncos defense in every league I'm in, and I've rode them the whole year. The last 2 weeks I've been like using the Dolphins in one league, but in all my other leagues I still have the Broncos.
Yeah. So I was I was looking for the Dolphins last week actually to try to get them, and they were already picked up and rostered. But I'm with you. I'm keeping both the Broncos and the Patriots, and I hardly ever rostered 2 defenses. But this year I'm doing that.
If you're looking specifically for a Week 17 defense right now, and it's really slim pickings in your league, the Bears got the Giants, and they are only rostering about 20% of leagues. Khalil Mack's not coming back. Bears haven't been amazing, but they're still the Bears defense playing against the Giants with no offensive coordinator in week 17. I don't know. They're only rostering 20% of leagues. I also think the Browns are a decent ad right now, 40% rostered. They play Pittsburgh week 17. Browns defense has looked really good. The Browns played Baltimore in their game before their bye. They just had their bye. And now this week they play Baltimore. That's stupid. It's incredibly stupid. But they picked off Lamar Jackson 4 times. They sacked him twice. You got Myles Garrett, who's going to be in contention for league leader in sacks. There's a decent chance that the Browns defense goes on a tear during the fantasy playoffs. So if
has there been a fantasy quarterback besides Lamar Jackson that's been more disappointing? I would throw Ryan Tannehill and Patrick Mahomes, but you'd have to argue that Lamar Jackson has been sorely disappointing this year, as from a fantasy standpoint, and really on a real life standpoint too.
Lamar Jackson was the first quarterback in NFL history to throw 4 interceptions in a game and win.
That's crazy. That's crazy. And to think that Tannehill could have been that guy.
Could have been that guy.
You know, I didn't hear the crazy uproar when Lamar did it. It was wild.
Yeah. I guess you got to be on Ravens Twitter for that.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
When you win, all things are cured.
Yeah, that's true. That's trure. Speaking of winning, let's help some people win their games and go through some of these questions. And throw the first one up. I know it's Daniel. Or is it Daniel or David?
Daniel,
this is a good one because I'm in this situation. I picked up Taysom Hill this week, and I had Ryan Tannehill. I'm personally going with Taysom Hill versus the Jets, and I'm a little scared. But you guys, we got in this big conversation last week about whether you should start Tua, whether you start Tyler or Taysom. All 3 T names, by the way. And you guys landed on Taysom. I landed on Tua. Tua, I think, was 2 points behind Taysom in the final rankings because, interceptions and stuff. Where do you guys land on this question? Justin, I'll start with you. Ryan Tannehill versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's never thrown an interception versus the Jaguars in 4 games as a Titans. And I think he has like 4 or 5 passing touchdowns and a couple of rushing touchdowns on top of that. Or do you go with someone that you know is probably going to get a rushing touchdown and at least one
against the Jets.
Against the Jets.
The worst run defense we've ever seen in the NFL. That might be going too far, but it's up there. I'm trusting Taysom Hill more in this one, and it's purely the rushing upside. And Tannehill could go out and throw 4 touchdowns, but even if he does, I think he's only throwing for like 200 yards in that kind of situation. So I think Taysom Hill is going to get you anywhere from 60 to 100 rushing yards, and that's like your baseline floor. So you just like raise the level there. If you need to win this week, it's tough. If you look at your opponent and they have like one of the better teams in the league and you think you really need a big game, you got to swing for the fences. I don't know. I almost think Taysom Hill even has more upside. Like he's safer and he has more upside, right?
Yeah, he's projected to have more points at the end of the day because
he threw 4 interceptions last week and he still had 25 fantasy points.
Yeah. Yep. He outscored Dak by like double, I think, last week, and he threw 4 interceptions. I mean, he's a horrible quarterback, but he racks up fantasy points like no one's business. I'll be starting Taysom in all of my leagues until he's not healthy enough to play.
Because you said it, when he's a starter, he's finished no worse than what? When we were in that chat.
It's not even below quarterback 12, I think. I think this week might have been like his lowest rank, and he was still quarterback 1.
Yeah.
Because this was the only game he's not rushed or passed for 2 touchdown passes in a start.
Yeah, Taysom has, in his fantasy starts where he plays 100% of snaps, he had 23.66 versus Dallas. Excuse me. And then in 2020, when he played, he had versus Atlanta 25 points, versus Denver 17 points, versus Atlanta 30 points, versus Philadelphia 22 points. So I mean, he's at least going to get you a quarterback 12 overall, quarterback 12 kind of performance. And the New York Jets are kind of primed for the picking. You saw what happened this last weekend when them and the Eagles were just, with Gardner Minshew, were going back and forth. And to be honest, Gardner Minshew's a better passer than Taysom Hill, but Sean Payton is a better coach than anything they got. And he's going to figure out a game plan. Kamara's coming back. So I don't know. I mean, I'm feeling a little crazy, but I'm going to side with you guys. They start Taysom Hill.
Remember when Harris caught that like 5-yard slant and ran 61 yards to the end zone for a touchdown for Taysom Hill? Like, Kamara's gonna do that also against the Jets. Give me a break.
Yeah, I mean, I would, at this point, you just start Taysom Hill. That's just my advice. You got to see what this Titans offense looks like.
Yep.
And who's going to be there, because you don't even know who's going to be there. And that Jaguars defense, for at least one half, was doing a good job of shutting down the LA Rams. And don't forget, they did shut down the Buffalo Bills. And both those teams had a lot better pass catchers than what the Titans have currently.
And they were stopping the Rams on third down. I think at one point it was like 2 for 13 or something like that on third down. Yeah. The Titans get into third down all the time. If they can't convert that, they're going to be in trouble. The Titans don't generate explosives at this point. So
not turn this into Titans podcast. It's not a gimme game at this point that the Titans are going to win this game.
And they don't pass protect particularly well, at least not consistently. And the Jags pass rush really got to Josh Allen and the Bills a few weeks ago, and like that kind of scares me a little bit.
Well, that was like the whole Josh Allen versus Josh Allen thing. I think
the Titans don't have Josh Allen.
Fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Jags don't have a Ryan Tannehill on defense either.
Yeah. Well, the next question was, okay, we got Tevin Coleman, Rex Burkhead, Jeremy McNichols, Latavius Murray start to
a real murderer's row here.
Oh my God, what's happened to your team?
Is this an 18-team league?
Oh man.
Shout out to Rex Burkhead. I went to middle school and high school with him.
Sometimes. Yeah. Tevin Coleman is going to be a must start, right? I mean, you have to start Tevin Coleman. And I guess Rex Burkhead, just because the opportunities for those guys, but you got to make sure David Johnson's not playing.
I think if McNichols is healthy, he might be the Titans' RB1.
Oof.
I don't know if I'm going to bet on that. I mean, it depends how important
Stoney
this game is,
you know? Stoney just said, hot damn, the streets are bare. Oof. Yeah. No joke. No joke. I mean, that's tough.
I might start Murray. He got involved a little bit last week. I don't know. These are
Freeman looks like the better running
Freeman's the
back,
guy.
Freeman does
the
look
guy.
better for sure. I'm just saying Murray got a little bit of.
Can you not pick up Jeff Wilson,
Yeah,
Daniel?
I was about to say, go pick up Jeff Wilson.
Go pick up Jeff Wilson, bud.
Yeah, because listen, if Elijah Mitchell's already battling concussions, even if he does start, there's a good chance that he's going to get a concussion during that game.
Jeff Wilson might be picked up if these are 4 guys that are rostered in his league.
I don't know. I mean, I'd be looking at anybody that may get snaps because there's no way I think right now that I could start.
Who did the
anybody
Texans
but
have
David
this
Coleman.
week?
They have Seattle.
Does Burkhead touch the ball still? Like, how much does he touch the ball? 10 times a game?
He played 46% of the snaps last week with David Johnson gone.
So he split it with Royce
yards.
Freeman. Is that what he did?
Yeah.
I'm not starting Burkhead, that's for sure.
Burkhead led Houston's awful backfield Sunday. So, like, he's got the volume, but the efficiency is not there. And
the Texans can't run block for sure.
So maybe it's Coleman and McNichols. That's a really bad group of
maybe
guys.
Coleman and don't start anybody else because they could easily get you negative points. I mean, I don't know what to do there. What's his next one?
Second to last from Daniel.
Metcalf, DJ Moore, Higgins, Shepard. Which one do I sit? I lean Shepard. You always start your studs. And Shepard right now is battling injury. If he's healthy.
And who's his quarterback? Jake
Mike
Fromm?
Lennon? Oh, yeah, it could be. Well, that leads us to Stoney's question.
It does. Should we skip down to it?
Yeah,
but you got to sit Shepard regardless.
Yeah,
so you don't know what Jake Fromm is. And I know people said Jake Fromm was Andrew Luck reincarnate. You know, who was that guy that said that in his?
That was Matt Miller.
Yeah, Matt Miller. But you got to start your studs, even though that your studs have been disappointing with DK Metcalf and DJ Moore. T. Higgins has been hit or miss here and there. You got to start him.
Higgins is a bona fide must start. Metcalf had his best game in a long time last week. I think that the Seahawks are making an effort to get him the ball more. DJ Moore, new offensive coordinator. Who knows what could happen? He might beat him.
Coach Bunt.
Yeah, he might run the ball. Who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? So I would definitely sit Shepard, and it's not even a question for me.
Yeah.
Here's Stoney's question.
Have I missed you guys? No, Jake Fromm is not startable or rosterable at this point, unless you just want to have the off chance that he's going to do something and just blow everybody away. You may just want to
rostering a racist. This is your guy. What's amazing about him is that the floor is the ceiling, which is 0, like not even anything.
Have you guys ever played or heard of those types of leagues where the objective is to score the fewest amount of points, but if your guy if your guy scores a 0, then you get a +20. So you literally need to score the lowest
for you.
If you're in that type of league, then absolutely start Jake. But unless Mike Glennon ends up playing, and he looks to be potentially cleared from concussion, so he could, if he does end up playing, then Jake Fromm would get you a +20 and be a horrible start in that scenario. All right.
Kelsey, Ertz, or Conklin? Oof. I
think you always got to go Kelsey to me.
Yeah.
Ertz has been so good.
Who's KC playing this week?
Kansas City plays the Las Vegas Raiders.
They play the Raiders, and then
you got to start Kelsey.
Minnesota plays the Steelers, and who is the other one?
Plays the Rams.
The Rams. Yeah, I think you got to start Kelsey no matter what.
I'd go Kelsey.
Yeah, you always start your stats.
Yeah.
This is a spam.
Wow.
VOA,
thank you for the FYI.
Tyler Boyd, no doubt. You can't trust.
No doubt.
You don't even know if Julio Jones is going to play.
Okay, if Julio Jones
does play, is he on load management?
I don't care.
I would start Julio if he plays.
Boyd has been absent from existence for like 5 weeks.
We'll see. I don't know about that. What's next one? I am Mr. Lyons, great Gam, and I see that you're trying to start to talk shit. But listen here. I've had a rough go of it in the fantasy football league for the fans. It's been awful. It's been horrible. Injuries abound. And so
me three.
This week, though,
putting on a good
because you stepped in here to talk shit, I'll be coming with the full force at you. It's coming. It's going down.
Shit. Zach's picking up Jeff Wilson.
Look at that. We helped him.
Put it on the ad.
Put it on the bricks.
Yeah.
Write it in the wall.
Yeah, this goes on all future marketing materials.
Yep.
This is a nice little testimonial. It'll be on the site. Thank you, Stoney.
Thank you, Stoney.
Melvin Gordon III or J.D. McKissick to start? I would start Melvin Gordon if he's playing. If they're both playing,
J.D. McKissick alive?
Yeah, I don't know if he's actually what his deal is.
Yeah, I would not play him though.
And I would also say that they're probably not going to rush him back because Antonio Gibson's obviously the better one of the two. And J.D. McKissick did not practice today. He did not practice today. Melvin Gordon did practice today.
Right.
Both these guys, their backups were amazing this past week.
Yeah, apparently he's only working on the side field, J.D. McKissick is. So you got – I think at this point – I think they're going to ride Antonio Gibson. They saw that he can catch the ball. They saw he could play all three downs. For the love of God, do not bring J.D. McKissick back and ruin everything for Antonio Gibson owners.
Agree. I
think that is all the questions. So
this was another option, I think, for Daniel with his incredibly poor running back.
It is true. C.J. Hamm does get targets. He had one last game, one the game before, and then 4 games ago. So he does get targets. Not many, but he does get targets. So if you want to roster him, I wouldn't advise it. He's probably a little bit better than Jake Fromm, though.
That will do it for the premier or the preeminent CJ Hamm Fantasy Football Podcast, The Flex. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, rate, review the show, then go buy our merchandise over at shop.broadwaysportsmedia.com and use promo code FLEX15 to get 15% off. Thanks for listening on behalf of Robert Greenlaw, Justin Graver, Broadway Sports. My name is Zach Lyons, and we just flexed on you.